It's so over!
Need for Speed is done!
Need for Speed! Need for Speed. Silence! I have something to discuss. You've seen this on Twitter. You've seen this on Reddit. You've seen this... Well, that's basically it. That this is not new. This is information that we already knew about. And here today, I'm about to calm you. And actually, I have some pretty interesting things that look, we need to talk about it. I played a bit of the Battlefield beta. It was enjoyable. I'll talk about whether I'm going to buy the game a little bit later if you care. Anyway, this is where I saw it. It's Hokey Hoshi's tweet. I didn't even like it. You know why? Because it's nonsense. Let me show you. By the way, to be clear, I love Hokey Hoshi. He's a great guy. Hello, Vince Zampella. This man, as we've spoken about before, is kind of in charge of both Criterion and all the dice. Basically, Battlefield Studios. And what's that? Battlefield Studio. Criterion. When did this reveal happen? 3 weeks ago. Okay, fine. That's not that long ago, right? All right. How about this? Battlefield Studios introducing...
Each of our 4 studios comes with its own culture and expertise into what we call Battlefield Studios.
Okay, you see a Criterion on there. All right. So when was this released? 4 weeks ago? 6 months ago. Yes, 6 months ago. Almost the beginning of the year. Hello, Emphasization Pants here. Please look at the date of the articles and when they went live, and then please look at the date of this video that went live talking about Battlefield Studios. As you can see, this is not new information. So that's why you didn't get an immediate, just out of there reaction from me, because ultimately, it's not that big a deal. Straight away, they've been a Battlefield studio since, well, they were completely told to stop working on anything else. We know this was a thing. This is a thing that happened over like a year ago by this point, that they became the new team that worked on the campaign of Battlefield. So that's not it, because that doesn't really help anything. Me just saying, well, this has been a thing for a year. Well, that's not, it doesn't really fill you with much hope. But I promise you, this is going to be worth it. I gotta do the build-up, you know? It's Criterion in Guildford.
Criterion have been supporting Battlefield for a decade now, and now we're going to bring that to the table as a fully fledged kind of partner in the Battlefield
I'm not
studios.
happy about this. I just want to shout out my
Mainly,
friend.
we've been focused on the single player.
Here he is!
So the
Daddy
campaign is back
Isaac!
for Battlefield.
Get back on the proper game. Anyway, I've been there. This is not new. Okay, let's look at the studios, which is always funny that why is Criterion... is it alphabetical? Whatever, doesn't matter. Criterion, DICE, which has been the main Battlefield developer for centuries, and we've got Ripple Effect and Motive. Now, let's go through all of these studios, because there's something I really want to point out to you, which actually excites me a little bit. Some of you will be screaming copium, but hear me out. Let me ride this train a little bit. This is the Ripple Effect website, and as you can see, Battlefield is plastered everywhere. This is a Battlefield studio. They've worked on nothing but Battlefield. This is the DICE website. Here are the games that DICE are... Hold on a minute. They made racing games? What the hell? Midtown Madness 3? Rally Sport 2, Rally Sport Challenge. What the hell? Bring back my DICE racing studio. What the damn? What the hell? They were racing too? Stuff Criterion. I want DICE to return to racing games. I don't give a damn. This is the Motive website. Motive, once again, Battlefield. But Motive are also working on this Iron Man single player project, which is quite interesting. Hello, Emphasization Pants here again. So these are Battlefield Studios, and this Battlefield studio is working on a not Battlefield game. This is a thing. It's just branding, essentially, to say this studio is credited for working on Battlefield. Let's be real here. And Motive, for the most part, has been a support studio on Battlefront and Battlefield games, so... And their past projects are Dead Space, the reboot, and Battlefront, and Star Wars. You get the idea. They're like a sub of DICE. It's basically what they do beyond Dead Space. So with those out of the way, that brings us to Criterion, which has been known for making racing games, and, well, they've worked on Battlefield in the past, and of course they worked on Battlefield now. It is the focus. In fact, to the point where they worked on the last Battlefield midway through the development of Need for Speed Unbound, and that went well, didn't it? No shade to Criterion, they were just a support studio, right? But what if I told you there's kind of a reason as to why they're working on this game, and it's not 100% because EA told them to. You see, Unbound was a little bit of a polarizing game, and based on how it's performed, and of course EA themselves saying don't advertise the game. We spoke about that. I'll link that at the end. We're also at a time where everything's more expensive, not just gaming as well, but people are being more specific about the games they want. EA themselves said they're going to focus on their own IP rather than like Marvel, which is kind of ironic, I know. And if the previous game didn't work well and they still need time to really perfect a formula to see what happens with the industry going forward, they need some time, okay? And this time should be spent used, and therefore it's on Battlefield. They've kept people working on handling, for example, that were working on handling in Need for Speed and are now working on handling in Battlefield. There's only so much they can do in terms of that. But the fact is, keeping them people around generally when that stuff doesn't really need that much focus, like handling of vehicles, it tells me an intent. We've seen it already. I say it time and time again. Need for Speed will return in new interesting ways. Need for Speed will return in new interesting ways. Need for Speed will return. I'm done. I don't need to keep saying this. Now, let me bring you to one of the elements that I definitely wanted to make a video about. I was thinking about making my second channel video, but like this is all now coming together to be very important. And that's kind of what I've been doing. Instead of just throwing out little tidbits of information and making everyone go crazy, I thought it makes sense to just collectively piece all this stuff together that aligns and then deliver it. So maybe I'm going to have to start doing smaller bits on the smaller channel and then combination of it on this. But hey, you know, just for those that didn't know, Ridgeline Games was a studio formed to work specifically on the campaign side, the single player side of Battlefield, and it was completely shuttered for no officially known reason, which was insane. Some people moved to other studios and so on, but Criterion then took the helm as the studio in place to basically work on the campaign while they didn't have this studio anymore. I saw a video a while ago, and I hate that I can't find this specifically, but we do know there are two studios primarily focused working on the campaign. Not to say no one else is involved, because DICE works on basically the whole of the whole thing, but from what I can remember, I believe Motive is the other studio working on the campaign. That means realistically we've got two studios primarily on the campaign and two studios on the multiplayer. Now, it's my perspective that a lot of FPS games are quite easy when it comes to basically what you do. You make the maps and the tooling for it essentially stays the same once you've got it right and in place. DICE has worked on campaigns themselves in the past, but right now they're focused on the multiplayer, which is ultimately the part that people are going to play the most. Analyst says EA plans to milk the wait, I wasn't reading. No, that's not from my mouth, that's from theirs. For everything it's worth. Their goal essentially is to make Battlefield on a 3-year basis so they can get Battlefield annually, every 12 months, to basically copy Call of Duty. Call of Duty has dominated for so long and is insane at how much they can rinse people dry, and they're taking advantage of the idea that right now people are kind of starved. But I'd like you to reread what that just said there. You know, their goal is 3 studios making Battlefield. 3. 1, 2, 3. Motive, ripple effect. That Criterion. That's not 3. Yes, if the long-term plan is to have 3 studios, we have got 4 currently, and we had 5. That is something that I think you should definitely resonate and let sit in your brain just for a little bit of time, okay? Now, this of course could be that the plan could be to have more studios. More is better. But realistically, if one of them's already working on another game, it's in early stages, and Criterion, which is definitely still hiring for Battlefield, which is intriguing. Again, to me, that would suggest that they are planning to beef up the studio of the Battlefield division, and then anyone that wants to move back to Need for Speed could probably do so. Again, this is not official, but like, that's the way I see it. To me, this says that ultimately this is not the long-term plan. They've told us Need for Speed will return. They're working on the Iron Man game, and Motive, before working on the Dead Space remake, just also worked on helping Battlefield. Criterion has the heritage in racing, and they know if they will not have that genre if they don't have them working back on the game again. They themselves said they want less licensed IP. To me, Iron Man is a little bit more licensed than that of a racing game. Okay, now, you can now say whether you believe that this is just pure copium or ultimately basically what the analyst said is correct. That would make sense. I don't imagine Battlefield needing more than a 3-year cycle. 3 years sounds like a long time, especially when you're going to be using the same engine, the same tech. All of that stuff is going to be pretty much stable for at least the next 3 games that all those studios are working on. When you see those changes, they would have had 9 years collectively to make any big significant changes. That is plenty of time. And the fact that they're working towards this, again, you could be for this or against this. I personally don't like the idea of any franchise, even Need for Speed, going back to annual. Would I complain about a yearly Need for Speed? I don't know if I would. So if I'm putting myself in the mind of a Battlefield person, to be honest, it doesn't sound that bad. I do think live service works better with this type of game, but honestly, what do I know about FPS games? Maybe I shouldn't comment on FPS games, but in terms of Need for Speed, if I put my brain in, I would probably be okay if we had 3 years development and multiple Need for Speed and different stories, and you could have your Hot Pursuit, you could have your Need for Speed Heat, and something else new completely entirely. Now, towards the end of Need for Speed Unbound, what was obvious is that EA was specifically thinking about the idea of how can we feedback and shape the game in the future so that it has more of a return value, especially when Need for Speed has always been about 100 people, 150 at most, in development on that game at once. And no doubt they looked at the past of where Criterion and Ghost were collaborating, and they made, while forming a studio, modifying the engine to work properly with the game, developing and releasing a game on was it like 6 platforms with Need for Speed Rivals? Okay, was it 6? It was a lot. Besides the point, they worked on a small team and they had a small time frame. From what we know, they genuinely only had like 6 months, a year at most to make that game. It wasn't the best Need for Speed, and it definitely wasn't the worst Need for Speed. But what I will say is that that is impressive. And then on this future data, what I will say, what we can say officially, is that we do know while most of the Criterion team were moved to Battlefield, and Criterion, the racing studio, was working on the racing game, updating Unbound, they did honestly more than I have ever seen Need for Speed do in that short a time frame, like ever. The amount of stuff they did was impeccable, and I couldn't believe that they managed to do all those things, adding fan service, adding motorbikes. Finally, you have no idea. They've been wanting to do motorbikes, clearly we know this, since Need for Speed Heat. Probably before that. They finally got drag racing back for the first time properly, and it was better than that of a full developed cycled game that was available with Need for Speed Payback. They got drifting in. Better than ever. They fixed the handling for the most part with those brand new cars they added, the Audis and all the other DLC cars that came after the fact in the second year of live service. They fixed so many things, and what was obvious, and the reason it was the case, is because they were listening to fan feedback. They actually got a group of us in, and I'm gonna say it seemed like having a smaller dedicated team was actually more beneficial for this franchise than having a massive, over-the-top, crazy amount of people that ultimately, most of them probably weren't really caring what type of game they were making. And they made the decision, most of them, to move to Battlefield. Some of them were forced, I'm sure, but a lot of them made the decision to move to Battlefield because, realistically, the game had a direction, they knew what they needed to do, but with Need for Speed, there is a case of like they don't want to make the same game constantly, therefore that's how we got Unbound, therefore it didn't resonate very well. It's kind of frustrating to release something into the world when EA didn't push it, and of course it just didn't do as commercially well as the previous one, when all they have to do at a time where Call of Duty is being joked at constantly, all they have to do is release military FPS game and make lots of money. It makes sense to me. So I really think having a smaller, dedicated team, and that became, I think, obvious to EA themselves based on Unbound, that we can wait, they can decimate Call of Duty, and once they've received their winnings, they can fund little side projects, and then hopefully decimate everything, because they want it to be top of racing, they want it to be top of FPS games. And really, the last FPS, the last Battlefield they made, was probably the worst FPS I've ever played. So I think that's in a worse state. It was in a worse state. And now it's good. So now we just do the same to Need for Speed. The official number of these developers constantly working on Need for Speed was insanely small. Insanely small. Officially, when 100 was like the top of the how many people they had, like 120 people working on like the Need for Speed Heat. It was small. Anyway, let me know what you think. Hopefully this calms some nerves. I'm still hyper focused on the idea that this is going to happen. Need for Speed is going to come. It's going to take time. It might be at the end of the generation. It might be next generation. But I'm going to be honest, we're almost at the end of the generation anyway. So does it really matter? Anyway, let me know your thoughts. Let's discuss.